And then the second issue was proselytizing in the military. You know, the military is a very confined population, and we rely a lot on esprit de corps and unit cohesion. And it makes it, and because we're such a confined population, it makes it easy for non-theist service members to be subjected to having to endure the religious proselytizing from leaders and chaplains, and occasionally sometimes there's repercussions when service members fail to adopt the belief practices of their commander or chaplain.
There's a conflict of interest issue there, right?
Yeah, in many ways. And then the third issue was the Obama administration's continued support, which carried over from the previous administration for faith-based initiatives. And the SCA, the Secular Coalition of America, has argued that if you're an organization that's going to accept federal money, then you should not be allowed to discriminate for hiring and providing services, and there shouldn't be any strings attached to receiving services, like having to attend a church service to receive services. And those were the three main issues that were tackled.
What kind of feedback would you say you got to this? I mean, were there any participants there who seemed a little hostile to the idea, or?
Nobody seemed hostile. And I have to be careful what I say here, because they told us specifically that we could not repeat what the representatives of the administration said.
You've got sort of a non-disclosure agreement.
There is a non-disclosure agreement there. And the reason being is I understand what they were trying to create. They were trying to create somewhat of a free speech environment where the members of the administration could have a real dialogue with us without having to worry about sound bits coming back to haunt them.
So Jeff and I were on the show last week, and we were sort of joking that presidents or presidential administrations meet with crackpot groups all the time and just sort of smile and nod for a little while and say what they want to hear. Did you feel like it was that sort of thing, or did you feel like there might actually be some sort of result coming out of this?
Yeah, interestingly enough, where it seemed that we got the most positive result was from the representative that came over from the Department of Defense. It was actually very surprising, because I don't know what I expected. I didn't expect the administration to send somebody over who was senior, but they did. They sent somebody over, a civilian. You know, our leaders are civilians at that level, and they sent over a very senior civilian who's in charge of personnel policy, which includes the chaplains corps and a lot of other aspects of the personnel business of being in the military. And he seemed to get it. He seemed sympathetic with our issues. Before either myself or Jason Torpy, he's the current president of the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers. Jason and I were the ones that were speaking on the military issues. Before either one of us got a chance to speak, he got to the representative, Mr. Bill Carr. He got to say his piece, and it was clear right off the bat that he seemed to get it. He seemed to understand the problem. He seemed sympathetic to our issues. He seemed willing to help us, and now it's just a matter of seeing what the follow-up's going to be. If it was real sympathy, or if it was lip service.
So
we'll see.
On the military issue, what were you arguing for? What would you like to have happen?
There were a couple of things that we were arguing for, and I'll hit some of Jason's points first. The big problem is right now in the military is 60% of the military's chaplains right now are evangelical Christians, and the other 40% making up every other faith group that's represented in the military population, and that's because the evangelicals have really in the last few years, especially since September 11th, have put in a big push to bring in evangelical chaplains, get them in uniform, and getting out there ministering to troops.
Are there any statistics on how many of the people that they're preaching to are already evangelical Christians? I mean, is this way out of whack with the military
Way
population?
out of whack. I don't know what the exact numbers are off the top of my head. They're on the MAF website, but way out of whack. Just like, if you take a military population, the military population is a microcosm, basically, of the general population. And 60% of the general population in the United States is not evangelical Christian. So 60% of the population in the military is not evangelical Christian. But
it's worse than that, because the evangelicals have a kind of a mandate to proselytize, right?
That's the problem. That's where we're running into
By the way, that
issues.
website is maaf.info, is that correct?
Correct,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, that's the problem, we've brought in all these chaplains now who believe they have a duty to bring the light of Christ to the service members that are under their sphere of control. And they believe that any attempt by the government to rein in that duty, to force them to do the job that they're supposed to do and minister to the needs of all the faithful under their sphere of control, they regard that as infringement on their personal religious rights. If you tell them, no, you can't pray to Jesus at this formation and have the soldiers in the formation pray to Jesus because you've got Jewish soldiers in the formation, you've got soldiers of other faiths, they see it as an infringement on their personal rights.
Well, and they answer to God, right?
They answer to God. They don't answer to, the commander.
Yeah.
Right.
God forbid you should answer to the commander.
What would be American Atheist's position on military chaplains? Do you think they should be abolished entirely, or are you just looking for a little bit more, moderation?
That's actually an issue we haven't tackled in an organized way because American Atheist takes their direction on how to handle military matters like chaplain matters from me because that's my job. I'm the military director, and they take my advice. We have a lot of members in our organization who are personally opposed to there being chaplains on the rolls. I personally am opposed to government-supported chaplains. But in the broader picture, being a military retiree, and after all those years on active duty, I understand the bigger picture is combat readiness. And if you've got service members in uniform who they believe they're more courageous, they believe they're better able to do their jobs, they believe they're better able to support their brothers and sisters in uniform when their religious needs are being met, then it could be argued that the forces have an obligation to meet those needs.
I guess it would be kind of a morale issue. I mean,
it is in a lot of ways.
If I could play devil's advocate for a minute, you get a college kid who goes, angel's advocate, we would say on the atheist experience. But you get kids who go off to college, and in general, they have access to every kind of church they could want. You ship someone off to Iraq, and there's probably not a lot of the kind of whatever church it is that they would want to go to.
If you ship, it's a morale thing. If you ship them overseas, if you ship them to the combat zones, or even if you station them in a small community, a lot of military bases, the towns around them are getting bigger, but a lot of military bases are still close to pretty small communities. There's no guarantee that service members' faith group's going to be represented out there. So that's what the chaplain's corps is for. But at the same time, if they're going to come in as a chaplain, they need to be prepared to service the entire population, not just their own particular faith group. And we have incidents reported to us all the time, and where service members have sought counseling they have the chaplain set up to do counseling, and where service members have sought, marital counseling is a good example because this happens all the time, and they'll sometimes, occasionally, the chaplain will get so wrapped around the axle about whether or not they've seen the light of Christ and are saved that they won't deal with the problem that they went there to take care of in the first place. And it's not right. And it was even worse even up until a few years ago, because until a few years ago, you could see a chaplain and have confidentiality, but you couldn't go to a mental health professional and have the same confidentiality. The mental health professional...
If you had problems, you'd be drawn toward the religious faith.
You had to be, especially if you had a security clearance, and you didn't want to lose your security clearance. If you went to a mental health professional, you were risking your security clearance because there was no guarantee of confidentiality. Now, that has changed in the past few years, but not because of a change in attitude towards religion and chaplains. It's changed because we've had more and more service members coming out of the combat zones needing treatment for post-traumatic stress and things. And you can't send a service member to the combat zone and then tell them they can never have a security clearance again because they needed treatment for post-traumatic stress. So that's what's brought about the change.
Okay.
So how are atheists affected by the current environment there in the military and the chaplains, and why were you fighting for the atheists? Yeah,
it's a commander driven in a lot of ways. We have a lot of service members are afraid to state that they're non-theists or atheists because they're afraid of repercussions from their commanders, and they have good reason to be wary of that, because we have a lot of evangelicals and I use evangelicals, I'm not talking about just evangelical Christians. I'm talking about people of very strong faith in several faiths, And but particularly with the evangelical Christians, they see it as their duty to bring their service members to the Christian light. So there's a big caution or a big wariness of coming out as a non-theist and risking repercussions from the commander.
And these are real repercussions.
Oh, these are real. Yeah, these repercussions are real.
Okay.